Happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome back to the Conservation Conversation. I'm your host, Eric Crown, and it is exciting. We moved over to Saturday now. So I'm excited to see how this goes. You know, we got a lot of feedback that everybody wanted to have a little bit more time on Saturday. So here we go. This is going to be our first Saturday. I'm going to jump on here real fast. So today we have an amazing episode. This is episode 13. Now, this is just going to be absolutely incredible. You know, we've talked a lot about Florida. We've talked a lot about how the water is affected by various pollutants, various things like that. And now we're going to talk about how the middle of the state is being affected. And the exciting thing is we get to talk to one of the original and one of the heavyweights in the water movement. We get to talk to Scott Wilson. He's going to be on our show today. So we're going to go through pesticides. What's going on with pesticides? And we are going to talk a little bit more about how they affect us and this example that's happening in Florida and how we can combat it. So welcome back. Episode 13. Here we go. It's our world. Let's talk about it. All right, here we go. Welcome back. Oh, we got a little bit of an old message there. So I see we have Colleen Marie joining us. Hey, Colleen. And Mitch Allen. Hey, Mitch. Good to have you on today. Hey, Camilla. And Jeremy, another amazing clean water activist. And guys, if you're not familiar, go to Mosaic. It's an amazing group. Mitch, stop FWC, public notice for pesticide spraying. Fantastic. Hey, Carrie. And there's Jared. Hup. That's a special message out to Jared. So, you know, I'm really glad that Colleen is on here today because what starts us off on this in a lot of ways is, you know, this red tide. Everybody is seeing the red tide and suddenly it puts it all into focus that we need to think about how the water is being treated. So this is from today, and this is actually, Colleen goes down and Colleen works on showing everybody what's happening on the beaches. This is from today. Now, there is a lot more destruction and devastation, but this picture captures the mood and the feeling of what's happening with red tide between the residents and all of the wildlife that are affected, which is, you know, an incredible amount from on and on. So, okay, what we're gonna do is, I don't know why that little red thing is on there. Reload. Anyway, you never know here on the Conservation Conversation. Things can go awry very fast. So there we are. Okay, so one thing I wanted to do today was start off with a quote. And the quote is about pesticides. How could intelligent beings seek to control a few unwanted species by a method that contaminated the entire environment and brought the threat of disease and death even to their own kind? Now, this is from Rachel Carson. This book is called Silent Spring from 1962. And what that was one of the first scientific studies on pesticides and how pesticides affect everything. Now, what's amazing about her is that unlike the majority of studies and research that we now have to take a look at, she wasn't actually sponsored by anybody or associated with or affiliated with anyone. So her work was her own work. Yeah, so that she's, you know, you get a true perspective from her. And if you haven't read the book, it's amazing. It's one of the environmental foundation kind of books that I highly recommend everybody read, especially in today's world where pesticides are being linked to human health, they're being linked to nature's health. And, you know, we need to really get a sense of what's happening out there. Myself, as somebody that doesn't eat meat, I eat a lot of vegetables. You know, I need to be very conscious of pesticides because pesticides are attached to cancer. And as you guys know, I'm still battling. Well, always be battling. But anyway, that's another story. What we're going to do now is, all right. Oh, hey, Michelle. Thanks for joining us. It's good to see you out here today. Hey, Tabitha is a friend of mine from back home. Severna Park years and years back. Thanks for joining today as well. Listen, the pesticides, we're going to be talking about Florida, but these actually affect everybody. Now, what I wanted to do was kind of just basically, we're going to have Scott Wilson on here in about 15 minutes. It's going to be amazing because he is just an amazing amount of info. So without delay, we're just going to jump right in. Now, what I wanted to start with was what's called the Green Revolution. Now, the Green Revolution is when around the 50s, they decided that, we needed a way to feed more people. Now, this is always the argument of fertilizers, the argument of pesticide, herbicide, and all kinds of stuff. Now, again, pesticides, I just want everybody to understand, that's Monsanto, that's Roundup, that's glyphosate. So let's go back to the beginning. The Green Revolution was the change that caused the birth of so much pesticide use. So the Green Revolution is actually, it's pretty amazing. You guys can check it out here. It says the beginnings of the Green Revolution are often attributed to Norman Borlaug, an American scientist interested in agriculture. In the 40s, he began conducting research in Mexico and developed a new disease-resistant, high-yield variety of wheat. Instead of importing half of its wheat supply, Mexico was now able to produce more wheat than was needed for the country, and they became an exporter by the 1960s. So that's a massive changeover. After the success of the Green Revolution in Mexico, the technology spread worldwide throughout the 50s and 60s, and this is when we started to get into industrial scale food production, which kind of put a lot of the local farmers out of business. The United States, for instance, imported about half of its wheat until the Green Revolution technology started using, which are GMOs, by the way. He created a GMO, and it became self-sufficient in the 50s, and we became an exporter by the 60s. So in America, we always think of wheat. We think of the wheat penny, right? From the 20s and 30s, but we were importing the majority of our wheat until the 50s and 60s. So with this new strain of wheat came new resistance to different bugs and different things like that. And there became the birth of the pesticides. Hey, Lola, thanks for joining us today. It's awesome to see you on here. Let's see what Camilla says. Biofortified is the new terminology for GMO. Now that's interesting. I didn't know that. Thank you. Let's see. So we are now going to talk about, to put it all into perspective, what we're talking about here is the use of pesticides. Now pesticides, here's where it all is going to come into play. In Florida, what we have is a situation where the people that are in charge are basically allowing these poisons to be used. And this is the big problem, is that a lot of times you'll find a very official tone of support for things that are super dangerous. Now, one of our favorite that we know about is DDT. Everybody knows about DDT, right? And it was actually outlawed in Britain in 1986 and banned as a pesticide worldwide under the Stockholm Convention in 2001. So this is something that we used for a long time in the most innocuous of ways, spraying it in. I've seen videos where people spray it in their houses. And the thing about it is we all now know that DDT is very dangerous. But I wanted to share with you guys a really, very serious topic, but this video just kind of cracked me up. This video is the government trying to make an argument that DDT is so good for you that you can actually eat it. So anyway, just enjoy this video for a minute. We'll be right back and we'll talk a little bit more about this.
The medical officer explains that buildings treated with DDT remain effective against mosquitoes for about 3 months. The entomologist calls for a bowl of porridge. This is sprayed with the solution in full view of the audience. He now eats several spoonfuls of the mixture to show that the contaminated food is harmless.
Look at the look on his face. Look at the look on his face. And the look on his face at the end, he's just realized what he ate, I think. And he's just like, anyway, crazy stuff. So the point of that video is that currently in Florida, you have what's called the FWC, which the majority of the people that are here watching are are people that fight in Florida all the time. So what happens is the FWC is supposed to be protecting the environment, protecting the people. What's happening is that they are the same body of water that's basically eating the DDT. They're the people that are saying, you know, we're only going to use what's safe. Now, some of the chemicals they use include glyphosate. Now, let's go to glyphosate. Glyphosate is one of the 17 aquatic herbicides the FWC uses regularly. Okay. Imagine this, over 12,000 pounds of it were used in Lake Okeechobee in 2017. So, oh, hey, Michelle Bisson is here. Hey, Michelle, it's good to see you. Hey, Sherry, oh, nice to see you here. Andrea, this is great. I'm excited to see everybody's names popping up. And Mitch gave us a little bit about DDT there. Yes, DDT, insane. So here we are. You know, we come from history where they're making these poor guys eat bowls of DDT to try to prove to us that we're fine. That's pretty desperate. So now what happens is the FWC is using this glyphosate and they're spraying it everywhere. And I just want to show you guys, this is the FWC website. And listen, I don't want to disparage the FWC because they do a lot of good things. And this is just one particular area where they're spraying chemicals that people do not agree with. So I think, you know, well, we have to focus on that aspect. It's not that it's a bad group. It's just that they are not, their hands are a little tied. And the more you guys put pressure on them, the more they can do to change this. But they are currently the ones that are poisoning the waters intentionally. So the problem here is much like my cancer that goes and invades healthy areas. There's now a cancer in Florida's body politic. And this is an important aspect because this is where Florida becomes an amazing example of how people are being sold out by their local politicians. At the same time, it's a great example about how people rise up and can be heard, because there was a huge petition in Florida to stop this glyphosate spraying, and the FWC actually stopped for a little bit. And again, please, everybody from Florida, I know the FWC does some good things. We are just talking right now about their use of glyphosate and herbicides to control what they consider to be invasive species in the water. So we're going to move on now. What we're going to talk about is their science. Michelle says their scientists are ill-informed because our government is directly tied to the makers of glyphosate. Exactly. That is, it goes right back to Monsanto. And remember, there's a Monsanto Protection Act in this country. Google it, it'll blow your minds. So yes, Mitch says the FWC, our mission, managing fish and wildlife resources for the long-term well-being and the benefit of the people. So they want to do that. Why would they spray glyphosate? Now, then they told everybody in basically the beginning of the year, we're going to stop because there was a petition that had, I think, over 170,000 signatures from residents in Florida saying, please stop poisoning us like this. Then our guest, Scott Wilson, went out with one of my absolute favorite filmmakers, Mike Knepper. And if you guys don't know Mike Knepper, I will put the link down there. Mike Knepper has changed everything because he goes and he takes his drone and he goes and finds the information. He is an investigator. He is a filmmaker. He is a passionate activist, and he's absolutely incredible. All of his videos are amazing. So I talked to him a little bit earlier, and I've talked to him a few times. The guy is just, this is what his life is. He lives and breathes trying to fight for cleaner water everywhere. And he has changed everything by letting people see what's really happening in areas. This particular video we're about to watch is pretty amazing because this video is a bit of controversy. The FWC said they were going to stop using this stuff. Then Mike went out with Scott Wilson, our guest, and they got this video, and I want to share it with you guys. And I talked to Mike, and he was okay about it. I want to show it to you because this video, actually, Mitch, you sent me this video to watch. That's why I was like, you know what? This is perfect for today. So it's amazing. It all comes full circle. Hey, Linda, watching 2 Florida games. Thank you for coming in with us. Can't share because of Facebook blocks. I know. That's, by the way, guys, before we even continue, Scott Wilson, my guest today, who's going to be on probably about 10 minutes, is being actively blocked by Facebook. I put an ad out for the show like I do every week, and because it had a link to his website, we got banned. So it's kind of funny that we are sneaking around it because they don't have voice sensors. So we're using Facebook to get around their own censorship of Scott to get the word out. So anyway, it feels like a little bit of poetic justice there. So let's go back. What I want to show you is I'm going to show you these boats that the FWC use. And anyway, I have more questions than answers. I am somebody that needs to know more about what's happening in Florida. So we're just going to let Mike talk for Mike and Scott talk for Scott. But let me share with you guys this Mike video. This is going to give you an idea of what happens when things, when these FWC boats go around. And this, remember that they are spraying basically Roundup and glyphosate, the thing that has been known to cause cancer now everywhere. So here we go. Mike.
I'm on Lake Kissimmee again. The FWC can't seem to stop poisoning this poor lake. This will be the third video that I have done on this lake in just the last 4 months. Today, Scott Wilson and I are going to take you to North Cove. The FWC has been spraying this cove for the past 3 weeks, and we have had reports of up to 7 spray boats are being used every single day. We couldn't believe it. The first boat we came across was chasing an endangered snail kite. It only flew 50 feet before it landed into another tree right next to a second snail kite. This was odd that it only flew a short distance because airboats are incredibly loud. This bird should have flown a mile away. The spray boat continued to douse the shoreline with poison, and when it got close to the 2 kites, they took to the air again. One of the kites just circled around and landed right back into the same tree. He continued another 100 feet down the same shoreline and came across a small bird. Watch as he sprays this poor creature. Scott and I both noticed that the kites up here were not looking very healthy. We saw one that was missing feathers and appeared to have holes in its wings. FWC, you should be ashamed of yourselves. We caught up with the spray boat just in time to see it spraying lily pads. These are non-invasive plants, instead they are very important native plants. There was so much poison in the water that most of these pads were brown and dead. In case you're wondering, this is what healthy lily pads are supposed to look like. We picked up and ran a few hundred yards and found a second spray boat that was showering the lake with poison. The entire shoreline of North Cove was completely dead from 3 weeks of spraying, but they still continue to spray it. All this dead and rotting vegetation is going to sink to the bottom and cover it with a thick layer of mud. The dead plants release nitrogen and phosphorus that was stored in their leaves back into the water, along with all the other chemicals from this spraying. We know now that these nutrients are what feeds algal blooms. We watched this boat spray the...
What can I say, guys? There's Mike Knepper's video. He is amazing. He is relentless. Look at him. He's just locked in with that drone. He's got that guy. He's catching him doing all that stuff. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And again, they actually indicated that this video might have been faked because they had told everybody they stopped, and they obviously did not stop. Now, what we're looking at here is the use of pesticides in a very non-selective way. You know, it's just indiscriminate. It goes everywhere. It kills everything. It affects every level of animal, like those birds that had the holes in their wings. I mean, it's crazy. And I will put the link down after we're done. I encourage you to go check out Mike Knepper's page. He's got tons of amazing videos. As a lot of you know, I was down in Florida working on a project about pollution into the water as well, which I'm very excited to talk about soon, although I can't fully discuss it yet. But Mike's videos were my school. I watched those videos and they were incredible. So anyway, I am going to, we're going to get on and we are going to bring in our guest, Scott Wilson, which is very exciting. Now, what's amazing about this particular show today is ever since I started working on water quality issues back here in the US, and especially focusing in on Florida, everybody said, you got to get in touch with Scott Wilson. You got to get in touch with Scott Wilson. And it's not as easy as it sounds. Like, he's a very accessible man. But I just reached out on Facebook, and I'm some random person. Anyway, I sent a message maybe like a month or two ago. And one day I opened up my messages, and somehow he had reached out to me. So we ended up being able to talk. And Scott Wilson, what I'm going to do is actually let him introduce himself. Now, this is a video I'm going to show you while we get Scott online with us. We are going to show you. So the FWC, their aquatic spraying management, they have a few public meetings a year, and they allow people to come up and speak. So the people that Scott has been, and they've accused Scott of making up lies, and they've accused him, they've slung some couple different different insults towards him. They've tried to discredit him. So they'll kind of do anything to stop things from happening. And again, I'm not here to disparage the FWC, just that, why am I concerned about Florida? Yes. Why am I concerned about Florida, Linda? My reason is quite simply this. In Florida, the child birth defect and cancer rate is 6 times higher than the national average. I have a cancer that was created due to environmental pollution. It's a cancer that the doctors can't quite figure out. And for 15 years, I have been through surgeries, radiation, and they just keep coming back. One of the reasons why I changed my diet and I started to eat more organically. So people do ask me, why Florida? There is a lot going on in California. But when I saw that birth rate issue, and I saw that cancer issue, and cancer is the #1 cause of death in Florida. It happened in 2011. It is just addled with cancer clusters, and there's an answer. There's a connection somewhere in here. So for me, as both a conservationist and a documentary filmmaker and somebody with cancer, my goal has been to go and to try to understand the connection. So I went down to Florida because I found some of the most amazing activists that I could work with and tell a story of a very, very conscious poisoning that is being allowed to happen, and it's affecting the health of everybody. So that's why, for me, Florida is a very important place. It's a very special place because it's a place where there's been the most amount of selling out of the politicians. I mean, a lot of the bodies that are supposed to help people have turned into the ones that permit this exact poisoning by calling it other things and masking it and leaving the official story to make it sound like everything's okay. But in fact, it's twisting and manipulating a lot of the facts that come through. So, for me, and that's why I started to travel the world too, because I wanted to understand the world and the state of pollution that we live in, because we need to start attaching what we're doing to what we're receiving. What, our output literally becomes our input, our pollution, what we dump into the waterways, what we do. I mean, from Aaron Brockovich that the waterways are basically contaminated everywhere. And we've learned from The Devil We All Know and from Stell Bailey's work that, we have this plastic chemical everywhere in us. And so these toxic, pollutive chemicals are getting into all of us. And so anyway, that's my answer to why Florida. And I love Florida because it's, unfortunately, it is facing this cancer epidemic of cancer clusters, of these high birth rates and birth defects. And, but at the same time, it is the place where the most amazing amount of activists are. So that is that's my feeling on that. Sorry, guys, I just have let me do this real fast. And I hope it makes sense, because there is a lot of important, but it's not like there's nobody else out there working on it. I mean, look, there are amazing documentaries that are being put out. Cat Chase just did one with the water keepers. That one is incredible. So I think, we've got a situation here where we are starting to use our voice to speak up more and more and more. Um, and, Linda, yeah, exactly. You're right. You're being sold out county by county by county. Um, and Mitch says the environmental crisis that Florida is experiencing is occurring in other states and countries across the world. Exactly. But again, this is another reason why Florida is amazing, because Florida is the example of what happens, and you guys are being assaulted from every side of things, between your fertilizers, your pollutants, your runoff, your everything. I mean, you're just being attacked from all angles. So I think what we're running into is that Florida is the best example of how to fight back. I mean, Florida has made the most impact back. So anyway, I think Florida is both a great example of the cancer of the body politic, much like my personal cancer that's just eaten away any protection that we expect and don't think twice about. And it's also one that is, like I said, has the best activists I've seen. I mean, I have never seen a group of people get together and go out there and demand change and make it happen. So Florida is amazing. And you know what? Like Mitch said, it's an example of every single town in America. We all go through this. And this is the thing, is that a lot of these towns need to understand what's going on. Linda says Florida land can't handle. Exactly. And now they're about to even have a bigger boom and expand. So anyway, sorry guys, I ended up just, diverging off. I'm very passionate about this concept of environmental pollution and health, the effect of the two, which is why the pesticides was the perfect thing for us to go ahead and start with today, because that's something that, as I said, I'm very passionate about, and I'm very, would like to know more about. So without further ado, let me go back to the FWC again. This is the problem, the cancer in the body politic. The problem is being that these are the people that should be creating a safety net between the people and the people's needs of health and the corporate needs of profit. That is their job. Now, they don't come out very often. They don't listen very often. But when they do, Scott is there. And Scott has some interesting things to say. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and I'm going to get Scott on the line, and we'll be right back. And I'm going to try to get this. Wait, my programs are just going nuts on me today. I'm going to try to get this chat back up and running, because Scott's going to be here, and I want everybody to be able to ask him questions. Okay, so here we go. For everybody that knows Scott, you're going to love this piece, and it'll make perfect sense. And for everybody that doesn't know Scott yet, you'll know him very well by the end of this intro. Here we go.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I don't think I need any introduction. You guys probably remember me, and judging from a couple of scowls back here that I got, I imagine they remember me too. My name is Pastor Scott Wilson. I am a lifelong commercial charter and sport fisherman, fresh and salt water. I have 54 years experience on the Kissimmee chain of lakes. I have, for over 40 years, been a weekend homeowner at the beautiful downtown Camp Mac, Florida. Since my involvement of Outspoken Truth, the FWC has attempted to completely discount me. I've been accused of spreading misinformation, and I've even been slandered by staff. But I want to tell you, as a retired pastor, I'm totally accustomed to being hated for speaking truth. I'm so grateful now for the filmmakers that I've guided and that I've helped educate. Jim Abernathy, Wilson McCourtney, and especially Mike Nepper. I know you've seen his videos. I will go on record to say that my solutions are not nearly as radical as his, but every Floridian does owe him a debt of gratitude for exposing the real truth. One of you gentlemen in Gainesville said that you could see that how the videos were visually troubling, and my question is, really? I don't think they're troubling. I think they're undeniable visual witness to an ecological genocide.
Okay, here we go. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for everybody just tuning in, this is Scott Wilson. You just saw him on the video there. He is one of the original water warriors in Florida, and I'm so excited to have him on today. So, Scott, how's so I wanted to ask you, how you feel about seeing the red tide coming back right now and its association with all the pollution and runoff.
I'm very concerned with red tide that's going on this year. Um, boy, I have a lot of experience, and all of my boy, I'm going to have to turn the volume down on this machine.
Yeah, no problem. All right, no problem. Yeah, for everybody that's just tuning in, we had some technical issues, so we're working past them. Okay, good.
Okay. All of my experiences, and nothing qualifies me to be talking to you, sir. I'm a Florida boy. I have commercial, charter, and sport fished my entire life. I'm 58 years old now. Have been a generational homeowner on the Kissimmee chain of lakes, which is part of the Northern Everglades system, for over 40 years there. I spend roughly 300 hours a year on the Kissimmee chain of lakes, and total saltwater hours in Florida, people can do their math. I have documented over 100,000 saltwater hours in Florida. So everything that I say is not from knowledge. I don't consider myself an activist. I'm certainly not a water quality expert or water management expert, but I have a lot of firsthand, knowledge and experience with what's happening in Florida. I do have concerns about the algal bloom that's going on this year, in that what a lot of people don't really understand is that all Florida water quality, and this includes the water on both coasts of Florida, is directly interdependent and related to the water quality in and around Orlando, Florida, that's seen exponential growth in the last 50 years. The water and the nutrient-laden water in the Orlando area flows north through the St. John system, and then that also, where it starts to flow south, just south of Orlando, is the northern part of the Everglades Basin. So it flows through the Kissimmee chain of lakes, and then down the river that they straightened in the 1960s, which turned out to be one of the most environmental cluster humps of all time. Just a huge mistake. And then it flows into Okeechobee, and then, of course, when Okeechobee fills up, they have to flush it out both coasts. For many years, 26 years, I lived in Marathon in the Florida Keys. I was a boat owner and a commercial fisherman. I witnessed firsthand. A lot of people don't remember that in 1987 there was a substantial algal bloom on Lake Okeechobee. In 1988, during that fall season, we had a tropical storm that dumped a fair amount of water on that part of Florida, and they flushed that water south out of the lake down into Shark River, which is about the middle part of the Everglades, south of Everglades City. All right, when that water hit the salt water down there, back then we used to get our news from a newspaper, and the Miami Herald called it brown tide, and then they called it black tide. But the thing is, just like last year, everything that water hit in 1988, it killed. And there are still thousands of acres down there in that part that hardly there's no development there, so nobody got to see it. But there's still thousands of acres after 30 years of seagrass beds that are never going to recover in my lifetime. The reason I have a concern this year is I keep watching these red tide reports, and the red tide is most concentrated south. And, I see testing go on as far south as about Everglades City, but nothing down there into Shark River. Now, they have been discharging water out of the Okeechobee Basin south almost all summer long. And I'm concerned that this year, that water, just like in 88, is coming out Shark River. It gets to Florida Bay, and it's been moving north. And then we had a tropical storm there a couple weeks ago that put 3 days or 4 days of onshore flow onto southwest Florida. And now what do we have? I saw today that concentrations are at a record all-time high in some of those areas. And it just is funny to me that it's not being fed by the Tampa Bay and the further south rivers that normally would be pumping out the discharges from Mosaic that are phosphorus laden. But everyone agrees now that the Florida the water quality in Florida is it's due, number one, everybody agrees that it's nutrient loading in the water. All right, and my fight with Florida has been over a aquatic plant that they consider to be an invasive. It showed up in Florida in the late 50s. It's called hydrilla, and it is an extremely fast submerged aquatic vegetation that grows and is one of the very best filters for removing legacy nutrients, both phosphorus and nitrogen. It grows extremely fast and can be harvested. We've proven now that it can be harvested mechanically with these machines that have been collecting dust for years. It can be harvested mechanically for much less per acre than it costs to spray it with chemicals. The reason my fight is with hydrilla is it's far and away the best underwater filter that we have. Number one, and number two, it's already there. And it's just, I know, I believe some weeks back that you talked to Mr. Alan Stewart. Is that correct? Did you have Alan Stewart on your show, sir?
Alan Stewart, no, we haven't had.
We're gonna make arrangements that you get. The gentleman is a UF educated, 35 years as an environmental engineer, and is far and away the most knowledgeable about the totality of all the symptoms of all the sources of pollution and how they work through the Kissimmee and Okeechobee and Everglades system and what kind of impact they have. And he's developed this plan called MAPS, which is Managed Aquatic Plant Systems. And it's a systematic mathematical way of essentially farming these aquatic plants in reverse. Instead of trying to grow the biggest, fastest crop you can grow, you're trying to grow the slowest, least producing crop you can grow. And he has proven and come up with ways that money that has already been subsidized to these areas south of Lake Okeechobee that are called STA, stormwater treatment areas, where they actually grow hydrilla as thick as they can grow it to clean the water that they've sprayed in the northern lakes. I mean, it just at some level, some of this stuff is mind-boggling. But according to his research and figures, he thinks that in Lake Okeechobee itself right now, there is somewhere around 110,000 metric tons of legacy phosphorus that are sitting in the muck on the bottom of the lake that has been created from. I've been seeing it since I was 6 years old, so it's well over 40 years. They have been continually spraying and killing this aquatic vegetation. It dies off. The nutrients are not removed from the system. They're just continually turned over. Well, federal government is paying these STAs as much as $300 a pound to remove these legacy nutrients in these stormwater treatment areas. And he has fought very hard now to make that funding available to the mechanical harvesters as a pay-for-performance incentive to go out and remove the hydrilla. So, there's good things, and I have to agree with you. There are a lot of great things about the FWC. They do wonderful work in certain areas. Unfortunately, habitat restoration and the invasive aquatic plants department, those two areas are absolutely missing the ball for all of Florida.
Now, how long have you been sort of involved with them or talking to them? Like, how long has this journey been to try to get the FWC to listen to what you guys
I had attended meetings, and boy, I mean, this is going back at some level. I have been fighting hard now for about 18 months. I have been at some level on the sidelines for more than 20 years, just from the destruction that we've seen it do.
And I was going to ask about that. What I really liked on your website, I think there was a thing on there that said, where anglers and environmentalists collaborate to make a change. So, and both groups have the same interest, which is the ability to enjoy nature in the future. Our great grandkids can enjoy it. What was one of what was your moment where you said, "What I can't, I got to speak up. This is."
I can't take. Okay, last a year ago, July, we have owned a fish camp that's on the Kissimmee River that attaches the Kissimmee chain of lakes just above Big Lake Kissimmee. I went to my fish camp there for my birthday in July, and we went to fish a traditional area that had always been very good. And in the morning, 2 spray boats that we followed came out that launched out of the Kissimmee River State Park, sprayed this favorite fishing area of mine called Osceola Slough. Well, we all know and have known for years when they spray an area, you might as well forget fishing because you ain't going to get a bite. Well, so we moved across the pond about 4 miles to another area behind another island and started fishing. Well, about 1 o'clock, 2 more boats come from a landing on the opposite side of the lake called Overstreet Landing, and these boats sprayed the exact same spot on the same day without any intercommunication at all, and I just lost it, sir. I went home. I wrote a blog that got got a little play and caught the eye of some scientists in Southwest Florida, and since then, just people have been coming on board. I had made some videos, and for about a year and a half, I have been hauling documentarians and guiding them around for free, out of pocket, on all the lakes in Florida. I guided Jim Abernathy, which is a pretty famous environmentalist shark guy here in Florida. I took an Emmy winner, Greg Davis, a gentleman by the name, great young gentleman you're going to hear a lot about. His name is Wilson McCourtney. And then I saw a video that Mike Nepper really didn't know what was going on with the spraying, but he made a little video and he put it up, and I reached out and contacted him. And since then, we've been going on. Obviously, you see the videos on a regular basis, and in fact, there's going to be any minute now, sometime this evening, another video drop from Lake Okeechobee about Eagle Bay, and it's absolutely going to make you cry when you see the number of wildlife and birds feeding from this nasty, filthy, sprayed on dead vegetation. It's mind-boggling at some level.
Wow. Yeah. I definitely will share that when we see that video.
Interrupt me at any time, because believe me, I can bunny trail on this subject for a very long time.
Good.
I'm not traditionally educated, but I have done my homework on this subject. I have studied through the textbooks that are required to get a pesticide applicator's license in Florida, and especially studied through the textbook that was written by a guy named William Haller from UF IFAS, and he is considered the godfather of aquatic plants, and have studied through these textbooks in great detail. So I have done my homework. I'm not just a
Well, but what I like is that you've had the firsthand experience, and the water is your place. So you know what it looked like 30 years ago. You know what it looks like now. You've seen the changes, and a lot of people that don't get to spend time on the water don't understand the full connection of everything.
People that are not on Central Florida lakes still, at this point, Eric, do not even know this is going on.
Jeez.
And it's going on 5 days a week on almost every lake in the state. I went and counted through the FWC's own report, and last year they sprayed every major and minor lake and every major and minor river system in Florida, totaling over 320 different water systems that they sprayed aquatic herbicide to. Now, this is the issue to the red tide, and this is what concerns me. When they spray these especially these floating plants, they die off. They create muck on the bottom. Primarily, they're not using the last few years as much glyphosate as they were at one time, but they're using another product called diquat. And diquat, unfortunately, because of the way that it's charged, bonds with organic breaking down material. And once it does that, once it bonds, it settles into the muck layer and never breaks down. The thing is, we have a year like 17 when we had Hurricane Irma. People don't understand that these lakes have been sprayed and every lake in Florida now has a muck bottom. There are places in Orange Lake where the muck is literally 8 feet thick.
Jeez.
Muck.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. But what happens is all these Central Florida lakes are very shallow water lakes. I mean, rarely is there a spot more than 8 or 10 feet deep. So when we had Hurricane Irma come through in 2017, what happened on Lake Okeechobee and the Kissimmee chain is it essentially, because they're only 8 feet deep, when it blows 60 or 70 miles an hour, the wave actions and the wave troughs actually turn the muck bottom upside down. And it resuspended all these chemicals that had been laden on the bottom for years. And then every year they open the locks about January from the Kissimmee chain to feed Okeechobee to provide water during the dry season for the agricultural interests. All right, when they did that in 2018, it had 40 years of diquat and all these other chemicals mixed in this muck that was resuspended and then delivered down there. And when it did, it was like dropping a bomb on the not the blue-green algae. And the blue-green algae, I mean, you sprayed most of the filter plants out of Lake Okeechobee, so you have no competing filters, so you have to have something in the ecosystem that's going to step in and fill that void. And unfortunately, it was blue-green algae. The lake got too full. We had a rainy year. They started flushing water down Caloosahatchee and out St. Lucie. And we all know the devastating effects there. It killed every dang thing it touched.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've dealt with red tide my whole life. I grew up on the west coast of Florida. I have a lot of hours on the way. Red tide in my lifetime was always typically small, localized events that were short-lived, that typically killed what we call trash fish. It killed bottom fish and ladyfish and maybe a few mullet. But I had never seen until last year. I had never seen sport fish like speckled trout and snook washed up on the beach, or bottom fish like grouper or jewfish. And I had certainly never seen any type of marine mammal, including dolphins, manatees, and even whales, pelagic whales, wash up on the beach because of the water flood. It never killed mammals before, so.
Jeez. I mean, that's that's the thing is, that's what I wanted to ask about next, because a lot of times there's confusion in people's minds. They hear about a lake or they hear about herbicide or pesticide, and they assume that the only people in danger might be some vegetarians or something that's going to eat a pesticide. But what I'd like to do is just take a step back and take a wider view on it. Stell Bailey's joining us. Hi, Stell. Stell's another amazing person that is out there always fighting for clean water and trying to spread the word about these kind of pollutants and dangers. So I'm really excited that she's on the show. We did have her on a previous episode also. But what I'd like to do is, if you could help us understand, just so people have a better concept of this, how the spraying on this lake can end up affecting human health, even out into the bay or out into the Gulf, or and how it affects
what scares me the worst is after studying in detail, especially through Dr. Haller's textbook, and it's called Biology and Control of Aquatic Plants, Best Management Practices. Well, in his own book, he lists that, number one, the only thing that has really had any testing do it to get EPA approval are the actual active ingredients in the chemicals. All right, typically these things run between 40 and 53% active ingredient. All right, the rest of that, the other half or more, is an inert ingredient, and most of them, when you go studying through MSDS sheets, are listed as trade secret inert ingredients.
Wow.
Well, Dr. Haller's own book says that very little is known about the long-term chronic toxicity of most of the active ingredients, and they don't know anything about the long-term potential chronic toxin. Listen, these adjuvants and surfactants that they add to these chemicals to make them spread across the water and bond to the plants, we don't even know what's in them. We don't even know. I mean, it's not. You
Wow.
can't even get that information from an MSDS sheet or the label book. None of that. This is we just don't know, and that is the scary part to me. And I think at this point, 40 years down the road from spraying, that we are just starting to see the adverse effects. Now, the other thing that I spend a lot of time on the Kissimmee Lake Cypress, Lake Hatchinahall, Lake Kissimmee, and I can tell you with in no uncertain terms, in the last 3 years, the lower food chain on that entire lake system is gone. Two of my best friends are some of the best frog giggers in Florida. Used to get 40 pounds a night on average before midnight. Their best night this whole year was 4 pounds of frogs. 8th grade science taught me the first way to tell an imbalance in an ecosystem is you watch the frogs. Well, the frogs on Kissimmee are gone, but not only the frogs, but there's a little fish that are used as bait fish called shiners. There's commercial fishermen that fish for these to provide the tourists with bait to catch fish. They don't even come to Kissimmee anymore because the shiners are gone. The shad are gone. And the more of this submerged aquatic vegetation that they kill when they go in and they nuke it, it kills all the small invertebrates like grass shrimp and the tiny snails, and there's all kinds of insect larvae. You shake a handful of this hydrilla out, man, and the whole deck of the boat becomes alive with these little micro creatures. Well, that part of the food chain is gone now.
Wow, and that's an untold. I mean, once you start to break a cycle like that, it's the same concern. Like they talk about pesticides, just disrupting bee populations now. And I was reading frogs are one of the most affected by pesticides. I think it's like number 2 or 3.
Right.
So it's crazy to hear about that. To hear about
how else is it affecting people? I think we're just barely scratching the surface to see how this is going to affect Florida long term. I can tell you this. I can tell you that I have had contact, and I cannot reveal any names, and these guys are buried up in the woods and never coming out till it's time. But there are sick ex-sprayers that work for Applied Aquatics, that work for the FWC. Now, one thing I might want to point out, though, is prior to 2011, all right, the South Florida Water Management District used to monitor, used to hire, and used to supervise the spraying, and nobody liked it back then. But in other words, when they did it back then, they were very pinpoint. They were very target species sensitive, and they left plenty of habitat and plenty of plants to filter the water. All right. It was not until 2011 when contracts got signed over and FWC turned over the application to private contractors. That's when all hell broke loose. And I mean, I can't tell you what it's like to be on Lake Kissimmee and see 10 spray boats a day that do not shut their nozzles off. They spray everything you saw Mike's videos. Man, listen, let me give him a plug while I got a chance to. What an amazing guy this guy is. And he and I are both completely self-funded. We've not gotten a dime from anyone. We are both into this thing for at least 15 or 20,000 each out of pocket for all the travel and all the stuff that we've done. And what he's doing is a godsend to Florida, because he is waking people up in a way that an individual voice like mine never could.
The guy's a legend. Yeah, he is amazing. I learned
just as
everything
a man,
from him.
Just spend as much time as I have with him on the boat. He's a cool guy. He really is. And his heart is. None of us are looking for. We're not looking for 15 minutes of fame. We're not looking for notoriety. We're not looking for film awards. We want to save our state, sir.
Yeah. That's it. I know that for you, the best thing in the world would be is if you didn't have to talk about this anymore. If things were solved.
People need to know, because people just do not realize that when these spray boats go out, that they have 100-gallon tanks that are set up. All right, just the one day that one video that you showed the clip of in North Cove, we tried to follow just one boat for the majority of that morning, just so we could get the shots of them loading up. And I want to tell you, between 8:30 in the morning and 10:30 in the morning, the guy had reloaded and dumped 500 gallons of poison on one boat. And this was before 10:30. All right, I have had great contact with an ex-employee of Applied Aquatics that will come out of the closet eventually and speak in our behalf, but timing is just not right for him now because, listen, we're messing with some dangerous people, man, and a lot of money, and there are repercussions involved in what we're doing, and we tried to prepare ourselves for that, but as a ex-sprayer, he told me that it's not. How do I say this? It's not it's not mandated, but it's recommended in order to stay in good standings with the company that one airboat operator spray between 10 and 12 tankfuls a day. That's 1,200 gallons a day per boat. When we were up in North Cove that day, there were 4 boats there that day, but 3 days before, there were 7 boats.
Wow.
And to see the perimeter, I mean, and we're talking about a lot of shoreline, and we're talking about from the bottom of Strum Island all the way around North Cove to Seven Palms, I would say is probably 20 miles, give or take, of shoreline. And I'm telling you, everything on the shoreline was sprayed dead on dead on dead, and they were still spraying the stuff.
Wow. So you guys are anywhere from 50 to 100,000 gallons of this stuff being
They're spraying
sprayed.
1,000 gallons a day per boat.
That's
And
insane.
there are Applied Aquatics owns 100 boats in Florida.
Wow.
And the best guess that we can get about St. John's Water Management District, the South Florida Water Management District, Swift Mud, and the Army Corps of Engineers are all operating spray programs. And let me tell you, the left hand know not what the right hand's doing.
Wow.
And they go and they spray the same areas without even communicating with each other. And, some of the chemical cocktails they've used this year, I mean, we in that one Mike Nepper video, and he's working like crazy on the law part of this thing to try to get somewhere. I mean, we have at least 8 dozen state and federal violations on that film alone. And there's more coming.
So I heard that they tried to discredit that video. I wanted to just talk real quick about this because a lot of the activists that I've met, and I know you don't consider yourself an activist, but I would just say a lot of people that stand up for nature. And I've met a lot of people in Florida, that are just motivated because of their grandkids and the future generations. And what I've seen is that there's always a little bit of blowback and repercussion. They tried to discredit the video, and I was just kind of curious, I know, and it's very true. You have to be very cautious when you deal with these kind of companies. As somebody that goes in and disrupts a lot of different businesses, you can get a lot of attention from the wrong people sometimes. So it's important you guys do it the right way. But could you tell us a little bit about how sort of they tried to play around that video? Because I like that you guys stood up for it. And I mean, you guys, without that video, people would have maybe kept believing what they were saying, but that video directly contradicted what they were talking about at the time. And I think that that's a very important battle because a single voice could be stood up and heard over a bigger, institutional voice in this kind of an instance.
They after providing, and I have been since being involved. I really didn't want to, but I stay in, or did at one point until I became the most hated man in Florida, was in constant contact with the higher-ups in habitat restoration and the invasive aquatic plants department of FWC. I was talking to these guys daily. Well, when we sent them, I sent them that video directly, so there was no question of whether or not they got to see it or not. And the response that we got from FWC was just, to me, it was appalling. I could rip it apart word by word. Essentially, what it said is that they were spraying these areas to open up more habitat for snail kites. But boy, I mean, I could go on for an hour about that. Up closer to where I live in Gainesville is a place called Payne's Prairie. It's a big reserve, and they saw snail kites there, large numbers, for the first time in almost 100 years this year nesting. and it is so thickly covered with aquatic vegetation that, and FWC is trying to tell us, well, the snail kites can't hunt. Well, I mean, we're talking about a bird that's got truly got eyes of an eagle. These birds can spot a snail from a mile up in the sky, so it's not. But what's happening is, especially in Okeechobee and the Kissimmee chain of lakes, is they have sprayed out so much. These snails need underwater plants to live. They got to have some to eat too, and they're spraying out all the habitat for the snail, saying that they're opening the habitat up for the snail kites. Their thing also said that the snail kites often follow treatment boats. So not only are the snails that the snail kites are eating poison snails, they're eating freshly poisoned snails.
Wow.
But to me, it was one big denial. Everything that they wrote as a rebuttal to our video was, I mean, it was, I likened it because I have had experience to help people walk through a lot of different kinds of addiction in my life. And the biggest thing that you fight with any addict is that thing about denial. And most of these guys are thoroughly convinced that what they're doing is benevolent and helpful to the state of Florida. And I'm telling you, it's killing everything that it touches. I have posted and received probably more than 100 photos from every sprayed lake and river system in Florida. And the largemouth, listen, I have caught largemouth bass that had worm tumors or parasite tumors my whole life. All right, these fish have these gaping tumors to the likes that no one has ever seen, that fishes all their life has ever seen anything like it in Florida, and it's coming from every sprayed lake and river system in Florida, and the common denominator is herbicide spray.
Wow. Do they have any warning signs up to tell people if you're going to go fishing, or do they just maintain the line that it's safe?
Not only are they supposed to, by law, they're supposed to give notifications and put warning signs at the boat ramp, and one of my biggest concerns is what they've switched over, which was just approved last year, is this new wonder chemical called Priscilla-Cor. And this stuff, depending on which label you read, the labels in the MSDS sheets contradict themselves. One of the sheets says that you cannot either burn or use composted treated grass for a period of a year, and it says not to eat fish from the treated area for the period of a year.
Wow!
And they're spraying this stuff all over Florida, and I'm personally very concerned because it's a brand new chemical. They have no clue, admittedly in Dr. Haller's own book, of what the potential long-term consequences might be. Yet, it's. And the big kicker here is I became fairly close with a company. It's a name only. It's called Texas Aquatics, but they're actually a Florida company. They build these boats, these machines that are just amazing. They're 80 to 90 feet long. They're 18 feet wide, and they're deep water hydrilla harvesters. And I've ridden these boats. I've been out there up close and personal, looking for bycatch, seeing exactly how these machines operate. And these machines actually can keep hydrilla maintained for less than half per acre of what it costs to spray it with chemicals. And I have contracts in my hand from Texas Aquatics that'll prove that.
Wow. So there's a cheaper, more environmentally safe alternative right there, and they're not even interested.
Environmentally friendly, but yes, it's cheaper. But when it removes these plants, all right, it's actually taking the legacy nitrogen and phosphorus out of the water column. It's taking it out of the system completely. And see, we all agree that nutrient loading is the source. There's a lot of disagreement on which nutrient loading source is. I believe that spraying and plant decomposition is a huge part of it, but there's agricultural interest, there are septic systems and sewage system problems. Of course, there's phosphorus coming out of mosaic. There a lot of different issues that are contributing, and then of course overpopulation in the Orlando area and the exponential growth in Florida is all contributing to these nutrient loads. But this is the thing, hydrilla and mechanically harvesting addresses every one of those nutrient sources, sir, because it cleans the water. And it cleans the water well. I found some pictures there from 20 years ago when a small lake on the Kissimmee system, Lake Cashenhall, was about 40% covered in topped out hydrilla. And it was the most phenomenal unknown bass fishery on this planet for about 3 years. Wow. And then they decided it was time to bring the helicopters. And then after they brought the helicopters in, you couldn't get a bite there for 5 or 6 years, period.
Wow. Wow. Now, I was going to say, as far as fishing goes now, Stell had a question. Have they tested the fish for any of these toxins in the areas?
I am working right now with Alan Stewart, and I have several of these bass tournament directors that are got an eye out for one of these diseased fish. The thing is that there is extensive protocol. And, that we have shipped, there are fishermen across the state that have shipped these fish to the University of Florida. And, I mean, literally, there's 40 or so that I know of, and every one of them gets the same answer from the state of Florida, inconclusive. Well, Alan Stewart, through his contacts, made a contact with a renowned fish pathologist. I believe he's in Wisconsin, big university, but the protocol for getting one of these fish, for handling it, for packaging and shipping is very extensive in order for that information and those results to be quantifiable in a court of law or anywhere else. So I'm waiting on a fish, and I spend a lot of time. I have pre-cut vacuum sealed body bags already on my boat waiting. I caught 3 diseased fish this last spring. Jeez. And was not in a position where I could handle them to meet protocol. I don't go on the water now without being armed and dangerous to be able to make sure we can take one of these fish and get real results for what's going on. Now listen, I do want to put this disclaimer out there real quick, is that and I agree that most of the sores that we're seeing on these fish are not direct chemical burns. Some of them are, especially the ones that are in lakes that are sprayed with dicot. Some of them are direct, but what has happened, and people so much smarter than I all agree that the spraying over 40 years and the massive decomposition of plant material has degraded the water quality to a point where fish's immune systems have been compromised. All right, making them more susceptible to these fish actually have bacterial, flesh-eating bacteria is what they are. And I'm really surprised that as many fish as I've seen handled, that somebody somewhere didn't have a cut on their hand and get a case of it. But they are bacterial infections, but I do want to state that is a direct result from spraying. It's just not a direct chemical burn in most cases.
It's more of a cumulative effect, like an unintended consequence in a way, one of those additional things they didn't realize. But that's terrible that's becoming their new norm there.
Yeah, I mean, for the tournament bass fishermen, the average fish weights for tournament catches in Florida has decreased exponentially on every major lake system except for the Harris chain of lakes, which is north of Orlando, where there is about a 40% coverage of hydrilla. In other words, there's tons of hydrilla in this lake, and they have now that system is one of the only places that BASS will come. And it's because of the water quality and the fish quality. Harris Chain of Lakes has produced the biggest overall average of bass per fisherman than any lake in the country over the last 4 years. But it's all due, and I went to a meeting in that area, and the homeowners are screaming for helicopters. They're screaming for Priscilla Corps to treat the hydrilla. And what they don't understand is bass fishing is substantial to the Florida economy. And as the hydrilla goes, so goes their fishery.
That's right. And I was reading it's a major component of Florida economy. And so I was going to say, as anglers, do you, would you guys, or how do you feel? Is it mostly now going to catch and release until these toxins can be, managed, or is there a
safe? Black bass, largemouth bass, those have pretty much been catch and release for many years, for 30 years now. I mean, it's such a sport fish.
Okay.
You know, which means that our lakes really should be teeming with giant bass, and the reality is they're not. You know, the fish have become harder and harder to catch, and a lot of it has to do with the amount of mud on the bottom. And for instance, there's a lake not far from where I live that I fish often. It's between Ocala and Gainesville. It's called Orange, and there's a adjoining lake called Loch Lusa. Orange Loch Lusa. Well, Orange Lake this year produced one of the biggest bass that's come out of Florida in 20 years. I mean, it was a 15-pound, 6-ounce bass. I mean, just a gigantic bass. I mean, unheard of. And there was one 5-fish limit that was caught in a bass tournament that weighed 45 pounds, which is about a 9-pound average. That's unheard of in a bass tournament. And the FWC is claiming victory on restoration on Orange Lake. But see, this is a thing that a lot of people don't understand. It's not that the fishery has gotten that much better. What's happened is they have sprayed and used these chopper boats and put so much muck on the bottom that there are very few areas left in these lakes where these fish are capable to spawn, where the bottom is sandy enough. So they're claiming habitat restoration when in fact what they've done is they've done habitat constriction. They forced all the large fish on all those giant fish were caught in a 1-week period of time during the spawn and caught in one area about 100 yards long on a 17,000-acre lake.
Wow.
So, you know, it's having its toll all the way around, and we're not being told the truth about so much about what's going on.
And I was reading too, you know, with the Gulf being claimed as one of the largest dead zones now in the world, there's a lot of hypoxia happening throughout the rivers and a lot of lack of oxygen and places. You know, when I was in Peru, they have a thing, it's a toxin called floridol, and it uses a pesticide, but it poisons so many kids and so many people that they stopped using it. And we were able to buy it on the street still, like black market, like $5.
Wow.
And you put it in the
Is that
water.
in some way related to a chemical called fluoridone?
Yes.
Well, fluoridone is used as a chemical cocktail mix with diquat and 2,4-D on almost a daily basis in Florida.
Oh my God, that's I got goosebumps hearing that, because that stuff is so toxic and dangerous. It's outlawed in the majority of the world. You know, we have found some guys that were using it, and they put it in the water, and it basically kills everything in there, and all the fish just kind of pop up, and they collect the fish that come up through that, and it's an insane poison, you know, as well.
Here's a very interesting note for you. Mike Nepper has done such an amazing job at getting these videos and getting people informed. Well, it's gotten to the FWC. They're feeling the heat. And they're feeling the heat in that the visual of people seeing these spray boats pumping poison and also pumping it out on animals has had an effect. So I just got a notification 2 days ago that they plan to treat, which is known as West Lake Tohopalaga, which is the largest of the northernmost Kissimmee chain of lakes, that they're going to treat for 2,000 acres of hydrilla starting this coming Monday, using a process that, listen, I have combed through hours and hours of documents. I've never seen it used at this large of a scale, but what it is they're going to use subsurface injection. And to tell you something about this, listen, I've never seen it, and I've been seeing spray boats my whole entire life. I've only ever been told about it, but in order to keep people from seeing the visual spray, they are going to drag these high-pressure hoses that have little tiny holes, almost like a soaker hose.
Wow.
And they're going to pump it high pressure, and they're going to pump systemic poisons, which is aquathol K and also Priscilla core, straight to the roots and the muck to treat hydrilla on Lake Toho starting this week.
Wow. Wow.
You know, I can't imagine listen, I'm taking Mike again. We're going this next week at least one day, and I suspect if we find areas that were treated the day before, then you're going to see a lot of dead fish and wildlife on this next coming video.
Oh, jeez, that. I mean, that's just even sinister that their response is we're being seen, so now we have to hide our damage, even though we publicly tell everybody we're not doing anything wrong and there is no damage. Their actions don't match up with their words, and you guys have them on the run. And I mean, the work you and Mike do by maintaining to make sure that everybody can see it. Like to me, that's just some of the most important things that can happen. That's what I try to do as a documentarian, is take my camera where it's not always, where we don't always take our eyes. You need to go show people and let them make in their own decision firsthand and give them the opportunity to choose. I mean, I'm just imagining all the people that are eating fish out there that don't know there might be a danger to what they're eating.
I am so concerned. Listen, I like to fish for actually a small freshwater fish that most people know as a crappie. In Florida, we call them a speck. And up until I got involved in this and really digging through and doing my chemical homework, in the last 15 years, I've eaten a lot. And if these fish are toxic, I'm already done. I can tell you that right now. But what scares me the most is the fact that I fish for these fish, and I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but I'm kids get cell phones and tablets for presents these days. I got boat oars and motors and bath plugs. So, I fish. I'm pretty decent at it, and I have over the years fed. I can't tell you how many deserving families with the catch that I bring in off of these lakes, and to think at any level that I could have potentially affected or their health in any way, shape, or form by giving them fish, man, that's a nightmare to me. Just an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, you have no idea, that's really, I think that's it's so frightening that, they're not alerting anybody. And, I think this is one of the things, and again, I go back to anglers and environmentalists. I think that a lot of times people think that we're at odds, but I think that we're always working hand in hand. I've worked with local fishermen around the world to address fishing problems, because fisheries collapsing is a chain of events unto itself also. And the more that
absolutely.
Absolutely.
And it's all related to water quality. Yes, sir.
Exactly. And the more that we and move our fisheries and steal from other people's fisheries instead of addressing our pollution issues, the worse the other collapses are getting. And I think that, it's really great to see, because fishermen are on the front line. They're there every day. They know the health of the water by the health of the fish. Environmentalists have a different approach to it, but we're all doing the same thing. Like I said, we all want to see our great grandkids go out and have a relationship with nature, and all of us see that slipping away, but they say that we can still reverse it. And I know Florida has a lot of battles, uphill battles. But
Eric, listen. Yeah. This water quality problem in Florida can be fixed, but
yes.
but this is the thing. It will be fixed by nature itself by allowing, especially this plant hydrilla, and also water hyacinth, which is another one that they have a big problem with. That it can become very. It can clog waterways. Water hyacinth is the only plant, as far as my studies lead me to understand, that can actually remove the BMAA toxins out of water that contains cyanobacteria.
Wow.
So I mean, it's a very important. And I have suggested to the FWC in certain areas of these lakes that they actually, I mean, it would not be that big a deal to put up like what they put around an oil spill, to put floating containment barriers in and grow, a couple thousand acres of this stuff on purpose, and then mechanically harvest it to remove the nutrients and the toxins out of the water. The big thing that has to happen in Florida is the Central Florida lakes and Okeechobee have to be allowed to return to at least 30% submerged aquatic vegetation. And the problem with that is the people moving to Florida, for them, that's not a pretty water ski lake in places. But the thing is especially the Kissimmee Basin, the northern part of the Everglades system,
That was God designed to be the pre-filter marsh for Okeechobee. If we would grow and harvest the plants out of the Kissimmee chain of lakes, we could. In other words, you have Lake Toho. It reads out, and by the way, we had to send out our own samples and do our own testing during this pilot mechanical harvest program to get the numbers on the nitrogen and phosphorus that this plant was removing as they mechanically harvested it. All right, so Lake Toho, about 80 parts per billion phosphorus. All right, in order for water to be legal to send below Okeechobee through the Everglades system, has to be at 10 parts per billion. So it's 8 times more phosphorus in Toho. Now it comes to Kissimmee, and it jumps up about another point because you're adding that more legacy. So it's about 100 parts per billion on the south end of Kissimmee. You get to Lake Okeechobee, and right now best estimates are between 140 and 160 parts per billion, 16 times more toxic than allowed to send the water south through the Everglades.
Wow.
But this could be cleaned up. We got to allow the plants to do it, and we got to. Florida has to make the investment. And listen, there is no amount of they can use the excuse that we don't have the money all they want, but there's no amount of money. Listen, the water that comes out of that Orlando area controls water quality on both coasts, all the way out to Fort Jefferson and the Dry Tortugas. It gets caught up in the Gulf Stream and comes right back up the reef track up the East Coast. All right, and if we would clean the water and attempt to make make an attempt to clean it at the source. So, it's been estimated that in 3 years, if we allow 30% SAB in the Kissimmee Basin, that the water leaving Lake Kissimmee would not be 100 parts per billion, will probably be more like 30 parts per billion. So, I'm not going to get into a big, long discourse about the EAA reservoir. My personal belief on that is that it's a joke, that it'll never work. And we have to address the symptoms at the source rather than trying to treat water after it's gotten all the way to Okeechobee in 150 parts per billion.
Yes, and I like that you talk about that because it's a really important aspect when it comes to pollution. Just the same, whether we're talking about plastic pollution or we're talking about discharges, there's what are considered upstream and downstream, solutions, and the upstream solution is the beginning, the source. And by the time it gets to the downstream, it's the equivalent of like a beach cleanup, and you can only do so much, but it's trying to stop the tide in a sense. And I think that, we have to put this pressure back on the source and the origin. Kenny Hinkle was talking about that, go back to the source and prevent it there. So
everybody in Florida is in agreement now. Listen, the EAA reservoir during its original design would have worked. They were going to use 60,000 acres. It was going to be 6 feet deep. It was going to grow full of aquatic vegetation. It was going to be the salad bowl filter marsh that was going to be needed to treat Okeechobee water to make it clean enough. All right, so the revised plan now, instead of 60,000 acres, the big reservoir is only 10,000 acres. But now, in order to accommodate the amount of water they need, now it's got to be 23 feet deep. The problem is the submerged aquatic vegetation doesn't grow in 23 feet of coffee-colored water. They're building another pond to hold water that was destroyed by spraying. If it was 60,000 acres and 6 feet deep, I have no doubt if they planted that full of hydrilla and hyacinth and water lettuce, that water would be 10 parts per billion in probably 18 months and go straight down through Everglades down into where it needs to be in Florida Bay.
Wow, and so the answer is in nature itself that creates its own balance. Yet it's fascinating when you were talking about this quota that a lot of these guys have to meet, or that they're and it's the same as like in Mosaic, where a lot of the guys that are running the a lot of the machines, if they stop the machine and they stop the money coming in, they're not going to get their job back, So you get this unfortunate situation where a lot of working guys are forced to look over things. And like you were talking about, and I think it'll be amazing to be able to get that whistleblower, which is a very dangerous thing. And it takes a lot of courage to speak up and to step forward. But it's amazing to hear today on the show, talking to you, that they do have quotas, and it's part of their contracts. They probably have to use a certain amount of it. And when you gave us the numbers of boats, it's staggering. It's like crazy, the amount of poison being pushed out for no reason, especially when we have a natural, and of course there's a natural solution, because nature has been dealing with balancing everything on its own, for so long. It's weird that people would think that we can know more than nature and jump in and try to correct it.
And one of the sad parts is that this thing, the annual report that comes from the FWC, is actually called a pollution discharge report. Imagine that. that documents what chemicals they spray and where, but that does not take into account any of the municipal, any of the county. I mean, they spray every retention pond, every ditch. They spray everything in this stinking state. I mean, when I say everything, and I'm saying that the amount of chemicals that come out in that report from the FWC probably represent 15% of what's actually going into the water in Florida. We got golf courses and track home communities with plush green lawns and fertilizer, and we got True Green that runs around that stays busy 24 hours a day spraying pesticides on all these manicured Florida lawns. I mean, if we really knew the truth about how much poison was going into the water in Florida, I mean, it would drop everybody. It would.
And that's what I was going to ask about. When it comes to Lake O and all of the discharge, what are like we were talking about lawns. What are the major contributors that pump up this algae bloom? Is it the industrial agriculture, or is
it's a combination. This is a multifaceted, perfect storm of pollution sources that have all come together. Spraying just being one of them, and the decayed plant material just being one. And also the fact that most of these herbicides break down into a phosphorus base, which feeds the cyanobacteria. They prove they can feed off that phosphorus alone.
Wow, so that's.
I just had a little brain scotch there.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. There's a lot of aspects to it.
When you get tired, you tell me to shut the heck up.
No, I was hoping you don't mind.
We're just scratching the surface right now. We really are. It's just, it's just incredible. And to see, I have old archive maps that my father handed down to me of Lake Okeechobee in the 1960s and Lake Kissimmee in the 1970s that show the old grass lines, especially in Okeechobee. And you can show that to any fisherman that has fished Okeechobee in the last 5 years, and they will tell you that there is not 5% of the grass on this one map that I have existing still left in Okeechobee.
Wow.
Where they should have 50,000 acres minimum of submerged aquatic vegetation in Okeechobee. Right now they have about 5,000 acres. It's just not enough.
Wow.
Especially when you put legacy phosphorus to the tune of 110,000 metric tons, enough to feed everything. It's enough to feed, Alan Stewart did the math and said that the phosphorus in Lake Okeechobee that exists right now, before any more is dumped in this year, is enough to support all life from Orlando south in the state of Florida for more than 200 years.
Jeez. Wow. And as we know, that is not that's not a very good, and that feeds all the algae blooms. That's that's what I wanted to ask as well. What happens in there, and then it does discharge. It goes to all the rivers, which are very much the veins of Florida. It also, I imagine, must parts of it must seep into the aquifer as well, and then you have your natural weather events where things are going to get whipped over, like you were talking about the waves get whipped over in the water. So this idea that the water has these boundaries that it stays within and that they can control where their poisons and toxins are going is a little crazy. Once Kenny Hinkle's on. Hey, Kenny, good to see you on here today. And Vicky Palmer. Hey, Vicky. So one thing I did want to ask about, it is a massive topic, but for a lot of people that are watching today that understand that what's happening in Lake O affects them on the coasts and in Orlando and all around, even if they're in their apartment in Orlando, this is going to affect them. They're not insulated from it. It's not happening in a lake or a pond somewhere far away in a contained environment. Now that a lot of people are starting to understand that, how do you recommend getting involved, or what can people do to to sort of step up, or how would you recommend that that
Well,
people can help?
I'm really at a loss for how to truly get organized.
Hmm.
There are some just amazing water warriors, like you said in the beginning, throughout Florida. But it seems like all the different water warrior groups that have their own pet peeves, whether it be political or whether it be against mosaic fertilizer or whether it be against spraying or septic tanks or what have you.
Yeah.
And it just seems like it's been very difficult to try to get everybody on the same page about this spraying. And listen, the spraying is the one and only nutrient loading source for Florida that we can get rid of, that we could get rid of tomorrow. Is something that will not take 10 years. It won't take $10 billion like it's going to take to build that reservoir down there. This is something that we could do right away. I was told at the last commissioners meeting of the FWC, I was pulled aside by the co-commissioner Mike Soul and told, look, Scott, we hear you. We know where you are. He goes, we get it, but we need money. And he goes, your fight is no longer with us. He goes, you might as well not come around here no more. He goes, if you want to make changes, you got to go to the legislature. And I asked him straight up, with my wife standing there, I go, well, are you going to help us? Can you help us get through some of this red tape to help secure more funding for mechanical harvesting? And he just looked at me and he said, no.
Wow.
And my wife's head whipped around and says, hey, that's your job. And the guy he got steaming pissed. And he stormed away from me. So
wow, and that is his job. I mean, that's his only job.
Exactly. Well, actually, this guy, this co-commissioner, he's chairman CEO of the company that owns Florida Power and Light. So
okay, gotcha.
He's well connected.
And that is the difficult aspect is that, it's a lot of times, and it's like you said, there's always some disagreements going on or things that keep people from being able to connect. But the beauty is when we can get the groups together. And that's why I kind of like this show too. I know with a lot of the names I see on here, we have representatives of a lot of these kind of groups, and we get together and have this conversation, and we jump past our normal politics and our normal walls and our normal, our normal boundaries, I think, because we all need to work together as like the old Encyclopedia Britannica sets, like everyone is a different book and the set is the true knowledge. So, to take in what you've been telling us today and to be able to mix that.
I get that past politics and past politicians have played a huge role in what's happened in Florida. But past what's done is done, and now it's time for us to all come together.
Yes.
To fix this. For me, this is not a political issue. Yeah. This is about saving Florida, and I've made some pretty bold statements to the FWC and to some other people, but I truly believe in my heart that if this situation with cleaning Florida's water woes at the source is not addressed and not addressed in the right way, that this has the potential to turn all of South Florida into a third world country.
That's very powerful, and I can completely see that because it's again, it comes back to the people that are supposed to be helping are now the ones allowing it all to happen and correcting the permanent record so that when people look back, everything seemed okay. And
I've never seen anywhere in a government entity where a government entity that was given the task of protecting our wild places and things that created a sub-industry within itself to the tune of about $25 million a year that was doing way more harm than good.
Well, yeah. It sounds like, yeah, it's kind of gotten a little monster out of control there. But again, that's why it's so important. Like, I loved seeing you speak to the FWC and holding them accountable, while those few times that they do meet. And it's great. I mean, you've definitely got their attention, and you've got them worried.
I've taken my voice about it as far as it can go as an individual voice. And now, baby, we have had a resurgence recently. Man, there is a lot more people coming on board with this thing. And change is going to happen. It's not going to happen in my time, and I get that because we're dealing with government. But I do honestly believe that change is coming. They did. The state of Florida, I will give them a tiny little thumbs up in that they did allocate for this year's budget an additional $4 million for mechanical harvesting. But sir, that's not even a drop in the bucket. Yeah. A startup figure to really get serious about mechanical harvesting Florida has been estimated about $120 million. And $120 million is nothing compared to what they're going to spend to build that reservoir. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about people's livelihoods on both coasts south of Orlando is completely dependent on this.
Wow. It hangs in the balance depending on their...
Yes, sir. I mean, people are starting to get the news, and listen, the Florida beaches ain't so pretty. They're going to stop coming. They're already there's a huge RV park that was built there near my fish camp at Camp Mac on the Kissimmee chain. And their bookings this year are already, they've had so many cancellations that looks like their bookings are going to be down 30%. And I guess it's going to keep taking the economy taking a hit and taking a hit and taking a hit until somebody wakes up and says, hey, this is costing us too much money. We got to spend what we got to spend to fix it.
And, it's sad that they're going to let it get to that human cost before they can do anything, because it's the hardworking people that again are paying the price, and it's something that with Florida, it's pretty amazing because the changes politically have been happening over, maybe 10, 15 years. I know a lot of people feel there's been corruption way longer than that, but the introduction of best management practices and the removal of having an adult in the room somewhere is still kind of recent. So I think, this pressure you guys are putting on can really bring that back in. And, they may not always show it, but that they're feeling the pressure because they're addressing it. And you can see it in their faces too when you guys are up there talking. And what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, Scott, this is, as you said, we're just scratching the surface here. And there is so much more to talk about. And as the elections come back up, what I wanted to do is, I don't really fall politically. I'm not a political show. But what I'd like to do is go beyond politics and talk about vote water, which is something Kenny Hinkle had said. And I've heard it used in a lot of campaigns, and I really like it, vote water. So what I'd like to do is, if it's good with you, I'd like to have you back on, and we just kind of do some continuing series where we're going to keep talking about this spraying, we're going to keep talking about this poisoning, the health effects, the monitoring of it. I'm trying to talk Mike into jumping onto a show with us as well, because as I said before,
Mike will, and I tell you, the other man that we really need to speak to is Alan Stewart. And
okay.
Listen, I know I'm singing his praises, but the man, not only is he one of the nicest, kindest men I've ever met in my life, but he is far and away, and I'll say this again, when it comes to the totality of all the pollution and all the nutrient loading sources and how they affect water quality throughout the entire system in Florida, he's more knowledgeable far and away than all of FWC or anyone else that I've met or talked to put together.
Well, I would love to have him on.
And
I'd
love the opportunity to speak and to help educate. I hope I haven't chewed everyone's ear off to the point that they're bored as all get to listen to me. But I would love to help educate or be a part of helping you get this word out in any way I possibly can, sir.
Thank you. I mean, it means a lot to have you on today. It's such an important issue, and it's one, like you said, that's kind of hidden, and they've done a good job hiding it from the local residents just as much as the national attention. And we have an opportunity to jump past local press and local information and go worldwide, to where everybody can access this information. And again, everybody, what's happening in Florida is what's happening in your town. This is not an example of a bad apple. This is an example of a rotten system, that's growing nothing but bad apples. So what we need to do is go back to addressing it at the source, which is what Scott's been talking about today. And yeah, Scott, I would definitely like to have you on with Alan. And by the way, I reached out to the FWC and I reached out to a few people. Of course, I did no response, but I am going to keep reaching out because I would love to be able to find a way to have them come on and do a public forum, because they control too much the question and response thing. And it would be nice to get them out of that comfort zone and make them answer questions here. It's a long shot, but until they do, we're all going to keep talking. And I would love to definitely have you back on because it's been a great honor.
Hey, listen, can I make one plug before we hang up?
Yes, please, of course.
Hey, listen, this is not to compete in any way, shape, or form with any of the other water groups anywhere in Florida. This is not that kind of site, but we have put together a website that's being hacked terribly. So you have to type it in manually as of right now because I cannot share the link online. But it's one word: anglersvoice.weebly, WEEBLY.com. And we have compiled there all of Mike Knepper's videos, other spray videos, all the speeches, all the blogs, all the chemical research, all the links to anything that you would ever want to know about what's going on with this spraying is all in one resource site. And just encourage people to share that site and use that site as a resource and reference. And I want to take a shout out to the lady that has put that together by her own accord and her own dime as well. We're all in this on our own dime, and her name is Joanna McGrath. And I want to thank her from the very bottom of my heart for what she's done to help us get this word out.
Joanna's been amazing. I find that a lot of efforts I see moving forward, Joanna is always involved in them. And, she had mentioned the website to me, and I'm glad that you brought it up because it's anglersvoice.weebly.com, right?
Well, yes, sir. And
okay.
One final thought. Listen, before I got involved with this, I can promise that I was never in any way, shape, or form any kind of conspiracy theorist. But I want to tell you, after being involved with this deeply for 18 months, the more and more it looks like what's being done in Florida is being done from a purposeful intent. And, so that's a strong statement to say that a government entity could be doing this with ulterior motives involved. But the more we get involved and the more we dig up, man, the more it points that direction. And that's scary as hell to me.
Yeah, I agree. Scott, I have never had a specific website censored on a Facebook post until yours. I was amazed. They told me it's just because of your website that they took down my ad. They are frightened of you. And that, even though, like I said, they may not tell you that, that's a sign right there that you have an impact. anglersvoice.weebly.com. I can't add it in my links or they will take it down, but I am going to add it. If everyone goes to my YouTube page, I will add it there and you can go to it and go to anglersvoice.weebly.com because Facebook, we're getting around your censorship right now.
Amen.
They can't stop us, Scott. That's something I learned from you.
Eric, listen, I cannot thank you enough for what you're doing and for this opportunity, and hope that I was able to in some way help educate a few people as to what what's really happening in Florida. And listen, by the way, next time you come to Florida, give me a heads up, and I'll put you. I got a sufficient little boat. I'll put you on the boat, and I'll let you go see it firsthand whenever you want.
That would be great. I would love to get out on the water, and and any minute on the water makes me happy. That's where my soul is. So.
Well, that's a sincere offer, sir, and that's an open offer, sir. So you let me know when you're coming to Florida. I'll check spray schedules, and I'll take you to where they're spraying.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you. That would be great. Yeah, I would like to. Let's go see this firsthand. You and I will go shake. We'll shake it up a bit too.
Amen.
Thank you for that. No, that's a great honor, and I'm definitely going to take you up on it. Yeah, and I'm going to be back there pretty soon when I call out a couple other companies for some of their pollution. But Scott, thank you so much. It really, having you on today has been amazing. I know a lot of people have been waiting for this moment to get to talk to you and to get to share your, to hear your information, sharing your knowledge. And it means a lot. And thank you for your efforts, because it's people like you that are changing the future. And that's exactly what we need
all
today.
I can tell the FWC is that they have never met anyone like me, and I don't quit.
I love it. Fantastic. Best message to hear.
All right, sir.
All right. Thanks again, Scott.
Well, bless you for what you're doing. I thank you again for this opportunity. In any way I can ever be of assistance, you just let me know. I'm there, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes. Well, I'll hit you up and we'll have you back on pretty soon.
All right, sir.
All right. Thank you. Have a great Saturday.
Yeah, you too. So
Thanks for being here. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. There we go. That was absolutely amazing. There's a few things in here. And again, I want to come back to what Scott said, because you guys have to think about the amount of pesticides that's being thrown into this lake to try to fulfill a contract. There was a whistleblower who's afraid to still come forward. And listen, guys, I've worked with a lot of whistleblowers. I've dealt with a lot of whistleblowers. It is very dangerous for them. It's very dangerous for them. You will find, if you go study whistleblowers, there's a pattern of them disappearing. And they have to do it right to make sure their voice gets heard, because most whistleblowers are like most people that I've met in Florida. They do it because it's bigger than them and they want to do it and they need to do it. It's important because nobody else is doing it. So, Scott talked about the whistleblowers explaining there's a quota. And it's not a necessary on the books quota, but, the NYPD denied there was a quota for years and years and years until there was a lawsuit, and then they admitted there was a quota. So quotas affect how people work. So they're out there spraying all this Monsanto Roundup, glyphosate, and these new chemicals that Scott's been talking about. Imagine that, 1,000 gallons a day per boat. That's insane. That's insane. And he said there could be sometimes 7, 8 boats a day. None of the boats know the other boats are doing it. They're all just getting hired. They're independent contractors. So we do have a situation where the people that are, again, the people that are in charge of taking care are the people that are selling out the people they're supposed to be taking care of. And once again, I come back to, it's cancer. It's the same kind of cancer that I have, but it's a cancer in the body politic, where that has been eaten away and is now weak, and it does not work as an immune system. So Mitch said, try to go to the website. I got the message, the site is going against community standards. There you go. See, Mitch, as Mitch says, they are censoring Scott actively, guys. Scott is speaking up. They are censoring him actively. This is a former pastor. This is a man who is speaking from his heart, because, you heard him on the interview. You could hear his voice break. This means a lot to him. This is a call to action. And that's another thing that's beautiful about Florida, is it's a call to action. Everybody's jumping forward and making a big change. And that includes Mitch, and that includes Vicky, and I know that includes Linda, and that includes Joanna. I want to say Brenda. There are a lot of people I could name. Colleen, Marie, Michelle Bisson. I know Vic is out there doing a lot of work trying to call attention to things. There are a lot of amazing people that wouldn't even call themselves activists. They are people that just want a better future based on what they're seeing happening today. There are people that say, we can't do this anymore. There are people that, like I said, I'm sure they'd be happy to no longer have to call themselves activists. But we have to remember that what's happening down there, what's happening in the middle of Florida in Laco, is branching out, and it's affecting everyone's health. And pesticides lead to cancer rate. And this pesticide issue is a worldwide issue. It's a huge issue, and we have a chance to make changes with the elections coming up. We just have to learn more about pesticides. what they're doing. Remember the story of DDT. Remember the government video where the guy eats the DDT and he's like, you know, he realizes what he did. Remember that that's the same spoonful of DDT they want us to eat, whether they're talking about spraying in the lakes or they're talking about, you know, other aspects. They're saying that it's safe and it's okay and you should eat a bowl of it. And I think that we've all learned now long enough that pesticides don't work that way. It's not the intention. It's not how they go. And we can't follow that fairy tale concept anymore. So we need to go there and to fight back. And getting images that I can't connect. See, my Aunt Betsy's trying it as well. And yeah, I don't know, you know, there is 233,000 train tracks across America, all spray. We're in a mechanical time. If everyone remembers, we go back to the Green Revolution was only in the 40s and 50s, guys. So the pesticide use became industrialized and consensualized in the 40s and 50s. We're now 50 years later finding all the effects. Oh, why do all the baby boomers have cancer? Why do all the younger generations have cancer? I think I'm Generation X, I'm 46. So my generation has tons of cancer. You know, my grandparents had cancers, but they were kind of rare. When you heard that somebody had cancer, you were like, really? Wow, I'm so sorry. But in my generation, everyone has cancer. And oh, hey, Andrea's here too. I see Andrea's here. And I wanted to say hi. Hey, Andrea, thanks for joining. So, you know, again, guys, you know, this is not just a Florida problem. This is an example of a problem that's happening in every town around the world. And we need to find ways to become educated about pesticides. There are a lot of good links that we can use. I cannot put them down there. Once again, I'm going to throw out anglersvoice.weebly.com. You may not be able to get to it through the website. It may be being completely taken down as we speak. It's not easy. You got to remember that the FBI has recently, in the last 2 years, classified environmentalists as the most dangerous eco-terrorists and the most dangerous thing, the number one priority on their list. So although we're not being shot and stabbed yet, like a lot of conservationists in Peru and Brazil that go and try to shut down things, we are being stopped. We are being stopped in the way that we know how, which is through social media, which is our sword. Our voice is our sword. Our knowledge is our sword. Our experience is our sword. And there's a lot of amazing people out there right now that are wielding their swords. And the internet's trying to find ways to bring it back and to limit it. So today was very important. Thank you all for being here because we got around Facebook censorship. I got to tell you the link to go to see Scott and Mike's work. We got to share their work, even though Facebook would not allow us to share it. They're completely not allowed to be in the conversation. Just think about that for a second. This is supposed to be a free platform, and they cannot be in the conversation. And Andrea says, happy to be here. I'm also a cancer survivor, rare type. It's crazy how exposed we are to so many factors that affect our lives. Andrea, that is beautifully said. And I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're okay. And I'm glad to hear you're a cancer survivor. That takes so much behind the scenes strength that people really can't understand. And I know you must feel like me, you know, when you see that kids have accelerated cancer rates, this is something we can stop. And this is what I want to come back to. Scott talked about this. It's an answer that requires no money, and it can be done in one day, and it can reduce the amount of cancers that are being seen in the area, not to mention the farm worker cancer rates that are way accelerated because of the use of all this pesticides. And I don't know if you guys have been down there, but in Florida, the people that work with these pesticides do not have any special clothing. I was down there, especially in Hardy County, and I saw what they do is they bring in busloads of people that are immigrants, usually from Mexico, it looked. And what they'll do is arrange a special visa. They bring them in, they keep them in like worker camps. They take them to buses, to fields on like school buses. And then you see this spray and they're spraying all day and there's pesticides everywhere and they're breathing it in. And some of them, you know, put their shirts up or wear like a little buff to try to prevent it. And I guarantee you it's not preventing it, because the birth rate increase amount is within Florida is where a lot of the workers have direct contact with these pesticides. These pesticides are causing cancer. There is no question to that. Monsanto has had to answer to that. Bayer, well, now known as Bayer, has had to answer to that. So we can't keep going on allowing this. And I'm very passionate about it. Linda had asked earlier, why am I concerned about Florida if I live in California? That's the answer. The answer is it's an example of how we're giving our children accelerated birth rates and cancer through allowing pollution to happen through the cancer that is now in our body politic. And we need to reclaim this, everybody. It's our world. It's our health. We are the ones that matter, not these groups, not these organizations, not these politicians. And Vicky's right. They won't tell the migrants. They don't know that these people that come over think that they're having an opportunity to make money for their family, not give them cancer and other non-curable diseases. And the cancers that they're getting, they don't know about. And I've done some interviews with people where they talk about the accelerated birth defects and cancer rates in the children in these areas, especially in Waimama. If anybody is familiar with Florida, that's one of the strongest areas where this is happening. So Emma says, the powers that try their hardest to make sure we know as little as possible, but we will break through like we are right now. Yes, Emma, I agree 100%. This is what it takes. We can do this. Emma, I am also a cancer survivor. I was clueless to so much of this stuff until I became ill, and it's so sad and infuriating. It is that it's kept out of the public conversation, like in the public mind. You know, you go to the store, everything's been grown, everything's fine, and we're all good. And look how lucky we are because we can just buy anything we want. That's the story we're sold. That's the shiny thing in the brochure. What's not in the brochure is that we are eating our own death with these pesticides, and we want to know more about it. And people like Scott Wilson and Mike Nepper and Wilson McCourtney and Cat Chase and the Water Keepers and more people than I can even mention right now are out there trying to spread the message. And I I will put their links to everybody down there because, guys, I recommend checking it out. The more you can learn about their pesticides, the more you'll learn how to get a handle on your own local pesticides and find out what your local company is using for pesticides. What is True Green using for pesticides? Vicky says, we will not allow it, and we will have to stand in solidarity. And Vicky, yeah, beautifully said, and that's us. We all need to stand in solidarity. Andrea's here, Camilla's here, Emma's here, Vicky's here, Scott was with us, Mitch is here, Sherry's here, Betsy's here. We have people from we have West Coast, Middle Coast, and East Coast in America. We have people from multiple countries right now because pesticides affect us all. And we all know that. And we know that we can get together and we can help fix this. And again, we're always being censored. Look at these comments right now. This is my first show. I want you guys to know this is the first time Scott and we tried to test our Skype and it didn't work. I don't know why. I tested it with other people. It worked fine. We don't know. We don't know if it's if it's part of it or not. But I will tell you, having worked in conservation now for a little while, the companies pay attention and they do watch. And you know, we know that, and we keep our voice, and you know what? It makes our voice bigger, louder, stronger. And the more unified we are, the louder our voice gets, the less it becomes white noise, and the more it becomes meaningful, and the more it becomes our call for change. And I want to thank everybody for being here today because we are all this one voice. We are all the call for change. And it's just exciting. It's exciting to be here, to get to talk about it, to get to talk about the topics that the press will not talk about, to get to talk about the topics that the majority of the places will not talk about. And as we learned, to get to talk about the topics that Facebook doesn't want us to talk about and a lot of other companies don't want us to talk about. So get out there, be a nuisance, Google everything you possibly can, find out what's happening in your area, find out where to go. Go to anglersvoice.weebly.com. check out Mike's videos. Go to fightforzero.org, Stell's organization, and learn about activism in the local area and how you can step in and make a difference. And thanks for joining, everybody. Your comments have been amazing today. It's really touching to see so many other cancer survivors out there, because it's you know, we know it's this environment, and you know, we've had cancer. What we do from now on isn't as important as the children's ability to not have to have cancer in the future. If we can avoid it, it's our moral responsibility to stop it. And we have one way to stop it, which Scott said: just stop using these pesticides right now. We have a natural solution. Let's go back to nature. Nature can balance itself. We don't need more chemicals to help balance nature. It's a crazy way to think. Thank you, Scott Wilson, for being on. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is a show that was really, really close to my heart today, and it meant a lot. Thank you, and we will see you next Saturday. We are going to have an amazing show. We're going to go back to South Africa, and we are going to talk about snare traps and other forms of poaching. And then the week after, I'm very excited. We're doing a very special show on fake ecotourism and performative activism. So anyway, thank you guys for being here today. Please put any links you can down in the comments to help us catch, help us have more resource around the area. And we will see you next Saturday. Thanks for tuning in. It's our world. Let's talk about it.